Are the doors locked? The windows bolted? Are the lights extinguished? The night of the Antler King begins, and those who are not prepared won't survive. Come close, newcomer. There's space on the floor in the corner with us. We'll sleep in shifts tonight, and when the dawn breaks we'll ken that we are safe, and that an hour year has passed within the Antler King's reign. Ah, this is your first night of the Antler King, is it? Well, don't be afraid. You have company and shelter. You won't be asleep unaware, and you won't be out in the wilderness. Aye, this is a village, but all the outside world is the wilderness on the night of the Antler King. And we don't tempt fate. It's best not to. So keep your head down whilst you sleep, and keep your eyes open whilst you're awake. Listen for the tapping on the windows, and for pacing on the cobbles. Oh, there's no use in telling you what the Antler King looks like. If you ever have the misfortune to see him, you're as good as dead by that point. If it's idle curiosity, I shall tell you, and that will give us something to talk about, whilst we wait the hours. The Antler King stands 6.5 feet tall, before the antlers are taken into account. He is the body of a man and the antlers of a deer, and a head and face somewhere between the two. They say his chest is covered in elaborate scarring, and that he wears skins below the waist. He roams the woodlands every night of the year, but one, the night of the Antler King. Now most nights, you'd have to look for him. You'd have to enter the forest and follow the prints, the ones that seem to be neither man nor beast. You would need to follow the gouges in the trees, the ones 6 feet above the ground that appear crudely carved with a knife. You would need to listen for the calls, the ones that are both living and undead. And if you are daft enough to do these things, and you are brave enough to chase the Antler King down, you would see him. It would be the last thing you would do, but I suppose your curiosity would be appeased. But the night of the Antler King is different. It's once a year, the longest night. He leaves the woodlands and he approaches the villages. He roams them one by one, searching for... well, we can only speculate as to what he's searching for. All we know is that on that night, we stay inside. We let him believe the village is deserted, and we hope that one day he stops looking. One day he finds what he seeks, and he never comes back. They used to leave offerings for him, back before the village was really a village. Wee baskets of fruits and flowers. He never took them as far as anybody could tell. Perhaps it was superstition. It's impossible to know what people were thinking back then. In any case, I believe it brought people comfort. A wee tradition to carry out with the Waynes. For some of them, it was the last night they would spend together after all. I suppose they hadn't made the connection yet. I wonder if they ever really understood that there was no appeasing the Antler King. I wonder if they spent the nights afraid, or in naive comfort assuming that a wee basket of trinkets would stop that creature. In any case, the basket stopped round about the Industrial Revolution. At that time, overcrowded families would leave another offering instead. A child that took up too much time, a baby that couldn't sleep through the night, a troublesome husband that drank more than was good for him. Those offerings were always accepted. A wee smear of blood on the flagstones was the only evidence that some people had ever been here, and that seemed to do it. Some people disappeared, but only some, and houses weren't broken into. People felt safe. Not everybody went, mind you. Some offerings were left on the doorstep, as they were given. But I suppose it didn't matter much to the families involved whether their loved one was taken by the Antler King or whether they froze to death in the cold. Of course you can't do that now, things are different, and if you can't offer anything that the Antler King wants, all you can do is hide. They did hope that he might have gone after the war, the bombs, the noise, the smoke, but no. Even during the darkest days, the Antler King demanded his due. It was easier to hide then. Nobody had their lights on anyway. Many families simply spent the night in their shelters and left it at that. You may find that some families still do. I have it on good authority that the Marshals, even now, will spend the night of the Antler King in their old Anderson shelter. Converted, of course. Big enough to be a comfortable night's stay, but hidden and safe. And that brings us to today. Or I suppose I should say tonight. I think that most people have given up, you know. They've just come to accept it. And when someone moves for another town, they warn them, sometimes. If the newcomers are friendly and neighbourly. If they don't cause trouble. Consider yourself lucky. Someone obviously considers you a friend. Otherwise you wouldn't be here, would you? You'd be fast asleep in a house with no boarded windows and no locked doors. You'd be in the only house with noise or movement. And you'd be the only thing the Antler King would notice, wouldn't you? But now you can. And you're prepared. But I'm sure you're wondering if there are any other wee traditions you need to know about in this town, aren't you? I suppose you'll find out closer to the time. Or maybe you won't. Exciting, isn't it? Well, that's our shift done. Get some sleep. Good night.